All right, so obviously the talk of the league right now is the latest draft lottery reform proposal that is expected to be voted on by the Board of Governors and owners on March 28th, but all indications are that this will likely be the new draft lottery system, the new rules with some minor tweaks to potentially happen before it's ultimately passed. And of course, since Shams Charania broke this news and outlined how the system would be structured, everyone from folks in the media, content creators, fans, even players have been reacting to the potential ramifications of making these changes and what that would have on the league and their future. And of course, my natural reaction when I see these type of rule changes is, how is this going to impact the Chicago Bulls, especially now that the Bulls have initiated that rebuilding path, which you could argue now, given these new potential rule changes, is probably going to be the worst time to do so. But anyway, in this video, I'll be breaking down how the proposed draft lottery reform is structured, what it means for the league, and more importantly, what it means for the Bulls. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, over the past few months, the NBA has floated around ideas of how to reform the draft lottery, given this is one of the most egregious years of widespread taking across the league to try and secure a top pick in what is expected to be a stacked draft class. And while various structures have been discussed, some of which were very convoluted and hard to follow, the league has ultimately narrowed it down to what they're calling the quote-unquote 3-2-1 lottery, which I'll get to why it's called that in a little bit. But here's the premise for how it would be structured. The lottery would now expand to 16 teams. Currently, the lottery is for the 14 teams that did not make the playoffs. There would now be flattened odds between those 16 teams, but in 3 quote-unquote zones, if you will. In these 3 zones, which I'll get to which of the teams would fall in these zones, you would have teams that would get 1 lottery ball, 2 lottery balls, and 3 lottery balls in a drawing for which every pick is up for grabs from picks 1 to 16, with some exceptions, hence why they're calling it the 3-2-1 lottery for the 3, 2, and 1 lottery balls that teams would get. Now, how is it going to be determined how many lottery balls each team would get, or how they would fall within these zones? So first, they're introducing a relegation zone, which I love, where the bottom 3 teams will actually receive lower odds than the teams above them. The 3 bottom teams, the worst teams in the league, would get 2 lottery balls in this drawing. Teams that are 4 through 10 in the bottom of the standings, so these would be the teams that missed the play-in but aren't in the bottom 3 or the relegation zone, they would get 3 lottery balls. And then the 4 teams, 2 in each conference, that make the play-in but don't advance to the playoffs, they would get 2 lottery balls, same odds as the bottom 3. And then this one is pretty wild to me, but the 8th seed, so the team that wins the second play-in game in each conference, those 2 teams would get 1 lottery ball. So yes, a playoff team, the 8th seed, would still get a lottery pick, and they would even have a chance at landing the number 1 pick regardless of how they finish in the playoffs. So in short, teams with the 4th through 10th worst records in the NBA, which by the way is where the Bulls finished this season, they will get 3 lottery balls, all equal odds of an 8.1% chance at the number 1 pick. The bottom 3 and the 4 play-in teams that don't make the playoffs all get 2 lottery balls each with a 5.4% chance in the number 1 pick. And then the 2 8 seeds in each conference, they would get 1 lottery ball at a 2.7% chance at the number 1 pick. And then, of course, the biggest difference here is that the lottery wouldn't just be drawn for the top 4 picks as is currently structured, but for every pick. Think of it like a raffle where you have tickets in a big container, you have a drawing for 16 prizes. The prizes in this case would be the draft picks. They draw the first pick, then the second pick, third pick, and so on. And just like in a raffle, you're obviously going to have a better shot at the top prize the more tickets you have in the system. In this case, the teams that are going to have the best shot have the 3 lottery balls in the container. Some are obviously going to have 2, some are going to have 1. Now, there are a few exceptions, stipulations, and if all this sounds confusing and hard to follow, well, yeah, it is. But a few things regarding the pick floor. So currently, if you have the worst record in the NBA, the lowest your pick can fall is number 5. Like, you can fall out of the top 4, but picks 5 through 14 are then ordered based on record. In this scenario, though, in the new scenario, if you finish with the worst record in the NBA, in fact, if you fall into that relegation zone as one of the bottom 3 teams in the NBA, your pick can actually fall all the way to number 12. Yes, now it is better than 16, so it's one advantage you will have in being in the relegation zone is that your pick has a floor of being the 12th pick, and then any team outside of the bottom 3 has a pick floor of 16. And then the other rule changes, which are pretty substantial in my opinion. Teams will no longer be able to get back-to-back number 1 picks. That hasn't happened in the league in a while where a team has had back-to-back number 1 picks, but still significant nonetheless. But even more significant is that no team will be able to draft in the top 5 in 3 straight drafts. And that is something that has happened more recently, like the Spurs, Rockets, and Pistons, who have all had 3 consecutive years of top 5 picks in just the last 10 years. And then the other thing that I thought was interesting is that the league will also have the right to expand disciplinary actions to regulate tanking, and would even have the option to reduce lottery odds and modify draft positions if teams are found to be intentionally losing games. Right now, the league has only implemented fines for teams who clearly tank and throw games, but to actually hand down punishments and alter their lottery odds is huge. So those are the proposed changes for the lottery going forward. Now, I'll get to what this means for the Bulls and some of the unintended consequences and downsides for implementing this lottery reform, but in short, and I know I'm in the minority on this because I've seen all the people up in arms over this on Twitter and Reddit, but I actually like this proposal. I'm completely fine with this structure. Sure, it's not perfect. There are things I don't like about it, which I'll get into. I ultimately think some form of tanking or throwing games will still exist unless you completely separate record from draft position, but we know the league is never going to do that. But in my view, this will force teams to stop this nonsense of tanking, where losing games is more beneficial than winning. Teams will be more cognizant of the fact that they can't just try and be as bad as possible and hope for a top pick, because the lottery odds no longer favor that anymore. And the fact that the league is going to have the ability to alter your odds if you try to manipulate your performance, I think is a big time win. Generally speaking, teams are going to be more focused on winning than relying on the draft lottery, which is how it should be. This is a league that is designed to be entertaining for the consumer. They promote competition and for the fans wanting to see their team win rather than lose. Like the classic meme says, you play to win the game. Losing should never be incentivized more than winning, period. Focus on winning. If you get lucky in the draft lottery and you're actually able to hit on your pick and not draft a bust, great. But it should not be relied upon as the only way to get out of being bad. Hope and luck is not a strategy, and this reform make that strategy even less tolerable. Now, I know some will say, well, this just really isn't fair to the worst teams in the league who are just organically bad, the ones that aren't actually trying to tank. They're just rebuilding, and this new structure keeps them at the bottom. Well, first of all, whether it's fair or not, I've said this before, this is a business. It's not a charity. You shouldn't be rewarded for being bad. Imagine a company, which all these teams are individual companies. Imagine a company with a poor product, bad management, being gifted and rewarded with something to make their company better and more competitive simply for the fact because they suck at what they do. Like any company, if you're struggling, you have to get creative, be innovative, do your research, get ahead of the curve, and try to get better by other means. There shouldn't be any handouts. This is a competition. This is a business. So yes, it should be uncomfortable to lose. It should be uncomfortable and embarrassing to be one of the worst teams in the league. And look, the argument that, bad teams will stay bad and have no way out of the bottom is completely misguided. If you have a smart and competent front office and ownership, you will find a way out. If your management sucks, yeah, you're probably going to stay bad, regardless if you actually hit on a top pick. I saw someone on Twitter, call out how the Wizards, they haven't had a 50-win season since 1979. Or take the Kings, who have been hot garbage for 2 decades, or the Hornets, who've also been bad for a long time. I'm sure there have been plenty of chances for those teams to get good during those long stretches under the current lottery system, but they haven't. Now, a couple things I don't like about this lottery reform, and then I'll get into how this impacts the Bulls. The biggest areas where you're going to see tanking is in the play-in area. Like, this is effectively going to make the play-in tournament irrelevant, which you have to think the league does not want to do. So, for example, it is going to be significantly more enticing, more advantageous to finish with the 8th seed over being the 7th seed. Because if you're the 7th seed, you're going to get the 17th or 18th pick, and you will have a 0% chance at the number 1 pick or any of those picks 1 through 16. And if I'm in the 7 and 8 playing game, I'm saying, do I want to win this game? and have a 0% chance at a top pick, or do I lose this game and then try to win the next one for the 8th seed? Because in that instance, I'm still going to the playoffs, but I'll still have a 2.7% chance of the number 1 pick, and an 8% chance of landing in the top 3, a 15% chance of it landing in the top 5, hell, even a 35% chance of that pick landing in the top 10. Those are the odds with having 1 lottery ball in the tank. To me, that's a much better outcome than finishing with the 7th seed. And then likewise, when it comes to the 9-10 matchup, do you even try to play hard to get the 8th seed? Because the 9th and 10th seed, missing the play-in, gets you an extra lottery ball, which is a significant jump in your odds to land a top pick. So I don't like that. I think that's a major flaw in this reform. Like I mentioned on Twitter, if you follow me there, while I do like the system and think it's better than what's currently in place, this still won't eliminate tanking entirely. It'll just shift the behavior to other areas, most notably making the play-in tournament a tank fest, which is going to be a bad look for the NBA. Now, how does this impact the Bulls? Well, it's not ideal if we're being honest, because of course the Bulls finally decided to go down a rebuild and take steps back to move forward, and then right when they do that, the league implements these sweeping changes to the draft lottery where it disincentivizes teams to be bad. And if anything, the last place you want to be right now is in the bottom 3, although it's not like the bottom 3 teams have no chance of getting a top pick. In fact, they still have pretty good odds, which is why I don't really buy the whole argument that bad teams have no way of getting better when their odds of getting a top pick are still pretty decent. But either way, it's not ideal for the Bulls when they're currently in a rebuild and then this happens. That said, the most favorable position to be in right now under these potential draft lottery rule changes is the 4 to 10 range. They'll all get 3 lottery balls. They all have the highest odds, and generally speaking, for a Bulls team that has been kind of always known to be quote-unquote stuck in the middle, well, this is sort of the best way to get unstuck. Now, it's possible you could continue to get unlucky being in the middle and always just fall in the 10 to 16 range of the pick, but you're going to have better chances at finally landing a top pick than you otherwise would, being the 9th or 10th worst team in the league, which is where the Bulls had been prior to this season. Honestly, this new system is probably music to the Reinsdorf's ears because they can keep being mid without having to spend big money, but have better odds at landing a top pick than they ever did before. I mean, you just look at the last 3 seasons, right? This year, the Bulls would have had 3 lottery balls, which is an 8.1% chance of the number 1 pick. Again, those are the best odds, having the 3 lottery balls. The 3 seasons prior to that, when they kept going to the play-in but missed the playoffs, they would still have gotten 2 lottery balls, which is a 5.4% chance at the number 1 pick instead of the 1.8% chance or whatever it was that they had before. This significantly favors a team like the Bulls than it has in the past under this scenario. And then look, because you can't have consecutive number 1 picks, because you can't have a top 5 pick 3 years in a row, the lottery reform means that this isn't going to be a multi-year tanking effort or rebuilding effort on the part of the Bulls, which I don't think was ever going to be the case anyway, because ownership was pretty clear. Hey, we don't tank. I don't think they have the stomach to go through a multi-year losing effort and continue losing fans as a result of it. But with this new system, this all but solidifies that this isn't going to be a long rebuild. At least they'll try anyway, because it no longer makes sense to do so, which is a good thing. I really was not looking forward to a multi-year tank. Like, we've seen this in years past from the Bulls. Going through rebuilds are brutal. And now you have a path to get meaningfully better being in the middle. So I like this. I know a lot of people are going to kill me in the comments for this. I've seen so many people going off in the league saying this is an absolute disaster, that you're an idiot if you think that this is actually a good system. You're punishing bad teams. No, what was a disaster was seeing just how rampant tanking was this year and rewarding those bad and tanking teams rather than punishing them. I take no issue with it. Play to win, hope you get lucky, but don't make that your entire end goal as a franchise, trying to get lucky. Now, we'll see if this ultimately gets passed later this month or what additional changes could be made. But in the meantime, though, guys, let me know what you think of these changes to the draft lottery. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.